The officer's hand went up before the car had even come to a full stop. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." It wasn't a question. Corporal Yvette Oduya-Chambers had driven that stretch of Highway 4401 outside Kingston, Ontario more times than she could count. She knew every exit ramp, every overpass, every speed trap between the base and her mother's house in Scarborough. She was not speeding. She had not run a light. The registration on her silver Lexus RX was current. The insurance paid, the plates clean. She knew all of this because she was the kind of person who checked, who always checked, because she had learned a long time ago that being right was not always enough. She pressed the button to lower her window before opening the door. Hands visible, movements slow, the small, exhausting choreography that black drivers in Canada know by heart. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked. The man who approached her door was tall, thick through the shoulders, with the kind of sunburned neck that suggested he spent a lot of time outdoors doing things that did not require much thinking. His name tag read Estrelnik. Behind him, a second cruiser had already pulled up, its lights going, though no siren. A second officer leaned against the hood with his arms crossed, watching. "We had a report," Strelnik said, "of a vehicle matching this description leaving the scene of a break-in on Division Street about 40 minutes ago." Yvette Oduya-Chambers looked at him steadily. "A break-in?" "That's right. And the vehicle matching that description is a silver Lexus SUV." "Yes, ma'am." She let a moment pass. "Do you know how many silver Lexus SUVs there are in Eastern Ontario?" Strelnik did not find this amusing. "I'm going to need to see your license, registration, and proof of insurance." She had them ready. She always had them ready. She passed them through the window without being asked twice. He took them without looking at her and walked back to his cruiser. The second officer, whose name tag she couldn't read from this distance, had not moved from his spot against the hood. He was watching her the way people watch something they've already decided is suspicious. Yvette sat with her hands on the wheel and breathed. She was 44 years old. She had served 14 years in the Canadian Armed Forces, 8 of them in logistics and supply chain management, the last 6 as a corporal with the Royal Canadian Army Service Corps. She had done 2 tours. She had loaded cargo planes in temperatures that cracked the skin on her hands. She had organized convoy movements through conditions that would make most people's knees buckle. She had never once been late, never once lost a shipment, never once failed an inspection. And right now she was sitting on the shoulder of a highway in her own car, in her own country, being treated like a suspect. Strelnik came back faster than she expected, which was not a good sign. When they came back fast, it meant they hadn't found anything, and were now going to have to manufacture a reason to keep going. "Mrs. Oduya," he said, dropping the Chambers entirely. "Corporal Oduya-Chambers," she said, not aggressively, clearly. He paused. "Your military?" "Canadian Armed Forces, currently on leave." Something moved across his face, not embarrassment. Something more like recalibration, the slight adjustment of someone who has realized the terrain is not quite what they thought, but has decided to press forward anyway. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," he said again. "May I ask why?" "We'd like to conduct a search." "Do you have grounds for a search?" "Ma'am, if you just cooperate." "I am cooperating." Her voice was even, precise. "I've provided my documents. I've answered your questions. I'm asking whether you have grounds under the charter to conduct a search of my vehicle." Strelnik stared at her. Behind him, the second officer had finally pushed off from the hood of the cruiser and was walking toward them. He was younger, with close-cropped hair, and an expression that suggested he had not yet developed his partner's particular brand of confidence. "Everything okay, Strelnik?" he asked in a tone that meant the opposite. "Fine," Strelnik said. Then to Yvette, "I'm going to ask you one more time to step out of the vehicle." She stepped out. She made sure she was standing where the dash camera on the second cruiser could see her. She had spent enough time around equipment to know its angles. "Arms out," Strelnik said. She extended her arms. She was wearing a dark green fleece and jeans. There was nothing in her hands. There was nothing in her pockets except her cell phone, which she had placed on the car seat before getting out. She stood in the cold October wind on the shoulder of the highway while transport trucks blew past, and Strelnik walked around her car, peering in the windows. "You mind opening the back?" "Yes," she said. "I do mind because you don't have grounds." Strelnik turned around slowly. "You're making this a lot harder than it needs to be." "I'm protecting my legal rights," she said. "That's not the same thing." He took a step toward her. Not close enough to be threatening by any technical definition, but close enough. We've got a complainant who says they saw a vehicle like this. A vehicle like this, she said. Not this vehicle, not this driver. A vehicle like this. That's correct. Then you have a description, not evidence, and a description of a common vehicle is not grounds for a search. The younger officer, she could read his tag now, Pellerin, was watching this exchange with an expression she couldn't entirely interpret. Not quite discomfort, not quite agreement, something in between. Strelnik pulled out his radio. She stood her ground. What happened next took 11 minutes. She counted them on her watch, the old military habit, the one that made time feel manageable, by breaking it into something measurable. Strelnik talked on his radio. Pellerin stood near the front of her car, not looking at her. 2 more cars slowed as they passed, rubbernecking. A woman in a minivan actually stopped briefly on the opposite shoulder before driving on. 11 minutes. Then Strelnik came back. We're going to need you to come down to the station, he said, just to answer some questions. Am I being detained? A pause, long enough to be telling. We're asking you to come voluntarily. Then I'm voluntarily declining, she said. If you're not detaining me, I'm free to go. Now listen. Am I being detained, Officer Strelnik? The question sat between them in the cold air. And then tires crunched on the gravel behind her. She did not turn around right away. She heard the car door and then footsteps, and then a voice she had known for 22 years. What is going on here? Major Derek Chambers, Royal Canadian Regiment, walked past his wife and positioned himself between her and Strelnik with the unhurried certainty of a man who has stood in worse positions than this and come out the other side intact. He was still in uniform. He had driven straight from the base. She had not called him. She had not had the chance, but she had left him a voice message when she first pulled over, the way they had agreed she always would, because they had been married long enough and black in Canada long enough to know that a voice message was not paranoia, it was preparation. Strelnik looked at the uniform, at the rank insignia, at the man wearing them. Sir, he said. The word came out differently than the words he had been speaking for the past 11 minutes. I'll ask again, Derek Chambers said. What is going on here? My wife has been on the side of this highway for nearly 20 minutes. I've been listening on voicemail. I'd like an explanation. We had a report. Of a silver Lexus SUV, Derek said. Yes, I heard that part. He looked at Strelnik without any particular anger, which was somehow more effective than anger. And in the course of investigating that report, you demanded she exit the vehicle, requested a search she did not consent to, and are now asking her to accompany you to the station without placing her under arrest. Strelnik said nothing. I'm going to need your badge number, Derek said, and your partner's. And I'm going to need the name of your staff sergeant, because I intend to file a formal complaint with the Kingston Police Professional Standards Unit before the end of the business day. Pellerin, the younger one, looked at his partner. Whatever passed between them in that look was not loyalty. Sir, we were just badge numbers, Derek Chambers said. They gave them. What followed was not cinematic. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no grand gesture of vindication on the shoulder of the 401. Yvette got back in her Lexus. Derek followed in his own car. They drove together to Scarborough to her mother's house and sat at the kitchen table for a long time without saying very much. But the complaint was filed, that part was real, and it mattered. The Professional Standards Unit of Kingston Police Services received the formal submission the following morning. It documented the stop, the conduct, the requests made without legal basis, and the 11 minutes Corporal Yvette Oduya-Chambers had stood on the shoulder of a highway in October, while 2 officers without grounds decided what to do next. The investigation took 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, Yvette went back to the base. She completed her leave and returned to work. She loaded manifests, she ran inspections, she ate in the mess and drank bad coffee, and did not talk about what had happened on the highway, except to the people who asked directly, and even then she kept it factual, the way she had been trained to be factual, because facts were more durable than feelings. But the facts in this case were damning enough. Officer Ray Strelnik had 2 prior complaints in his file, one from 2019, one from 2021. Both had been dismissed at preliminary stages. Both involved traffic stops of black drivers in the Kingston area. Both had noted similar conduct, requests for searches without clear grounds, extension of stops without justification, language that the complainants described as dismissive and demeaning. The third complaint did not get dismissed. Strelnik was suspended without pay pending a disciplinary hearing. Pellerin, who, it emerged, had raised his own concerns to a supervisor 2 days after the incident, which was noted, received a formal reprimand and mandatory retraining. The staff sergeant who had been their direct superior was required to attend a review of his unit's stop-and-search practices. None of this made the front page of any newspaper. These things rarely do, unless someone is filming, unless the story has a clean enough shape for a headline. What happened to Yvette Oduya-Chambers was not a headline. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a stretch of highway, a woman with her hands visible and her documents ready, standing in the cold for 11 minutes because someone had made a decision about her before she ever rolled down her window. But consequences have a way of arriving in quieter forms than people expect. Strelnik's hearing concluded in the spring. He did not return to street patrol. The conditions attached to his reinstatement, if it came, were extensive enough that his colleagues understood something had changed in how these things would be handled. One of them said as much in the lunchroom, not thinking about who was listening. What he said was, they actually followed through this time. That sentence alone was worth something. The Canadian Armed Forces sent a letter to the Kingston Police Services, not demanding anything, not threatening anything, simply noting that a serving member had been subject to conduct that raised questions about compliance with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that the matter was being tracked. It was bureaucratic language, the kind that sounds like nothing until you understand who signed it and why. Derek Chambers did not ask for that letter to be sent. He did not know about it until afterward. It was sent because someone in the chain of command had read the incident report and decided, without being asked, that it warranted a response. That, too, was worth something. Yvette's mother, a woman named Constance, who had come to Canada from Lagos in 1981 and raised 3 children in Scarborough while working nights at a hospital and attending school during the days, listened to the whole story at the kitchen table and said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "They always think the car is too nice, or the clothes are too nice, or the address is too good. They can't imagine it belongs to you." Yvette said, "I know, Mum." Constance said, "You handled it right." That, more than the letter, more than the hearing outcome, more than any of it, was the thing Yvette would carry. There is something that gets said sometimes, in comment sections and conversations and the quiet aftermath of stories like this one, that goes roughly like this. It should not have taken a major in uniform to change the temperature of that stop. The corporal was enough. The documentation was enough. The legal knowledge was enough. It should have been enough from the first question, from the first moment of eye contact, from the first rolled down window. And that is true. That is absolutely true. The dignity Yvette Oduya-Chambers was owed on that highway did not depend on her husband's rank insignia or the letter from the armed forces or the professional standards investigation. It was owed before any of that. It was owed before she pulled over. It was owed in the same way it is owed to every person sitting in every car on every road in this country, simply, completely, and without condition. The system, when it worked here, worked slowly and imperfectly, and only after documentation and persistence and a formal complaint filed before the end of business on the day it happened. That is not a celebration. That is a baseline, and baselines are where accountability begins, not where it ends. What Officer Strelnik encountered on the shoulder of the 401 was not a woman who did not know her rights. He encountered a woman who knew them precisely, had spent 14 years in service of the country that granted them, and was not willing to pretend otherwise on a cold Tuesday afternoon. That is the part worth remembering. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something shift reading it, ask yourself why it took a formal complaint, 6 weeks, and a letter from a military institution for the record to reflect what Corporal Oduya-Chambers already knew standing on that gravel shoulder. And then think about the ones who don't have the documents, the rank in the family, the voice message already saved as evidence. Think about what they're owed to. Justice, when it comes, should not require a uniform in the rearview mirror. But until the system learns that on its own, people like Yvette Oduya-Chambers will keep teaching it, one documented complaint at a time. I keep thinking about those 11 minutes. Not the hearing, not the suspension, not the letter that eventually landed on someone's desk at Kingston Police Services. Just those 11 minutes on the shoulder of the 401, wind coming off the highway, transport trucks blowing past, and a woman standing with her arms out and her documents already given and nothing left to prove, except that she knew she didn't have to prove anything. That's the part that stays with me. Yvette Oduya-Chambers didn't win because her husband showed up in uniform. She had already won, in the way that actually matters. She knew the law, she held her ground, She kept her voice level when most people would have either folded or escalated. She did everything right before anyone arrived to witness it. The major's uniform didn't change the truth of what happened. It just made it harder to ignore. There's something in that worth sitting with. We talk a lot about doing the right thing, but I think what we really mean, what Yvette's story actually shows, is that integrity isn't something you perform for an audience. It's what you do when no one powerful is watching. When the cars are blowing past and the officer is walking back to his cruiser and you're standing there alone deciding whether to push back or go quiet. She pushed back, calmly, precisely, without losing a beat. That takes something that can't be handed to you with a rank or a uniform. It has to already be there. And then there's the other side of it. What Strelnick's file eventually showed, 2 prior complaints, same pattern, same stretch of highway, same kind of stop, tells you that this wasn't an accident. It was a habit. And habits, when they go unchallenged, calcify into something worse. The reason the 3rd complaint landed differently wasn't luck. It was because Yvette documented everything, filed before the end of business, and didn't accept voluntary as a substitute for lawful. She understood the system well enough to use it, and that understanding was the sharpest tool she had. I think about Constance too. Yvette's mother, who came to Canada in 1981 and built a life through night shifts and morning classes, and the kind of persistence that doesn't look like anything dramatic from the outside. She listened to the whole story and said, "You handled it right," 4 words. But they carried the weight of everything her mother had learned about surviving systems that weren't built with you in mind, and choosing to them anyway, on your own terms, with your head up. That's what the 3 of them share, across generations. A moral clarity that doesn't bend under pressure, the knowledge to navigate what's in front of them without flinching, and the endurance to see it through even when the outcome is uncertain. Not because someone is watching, not because a camera is rolling, because that's who they decided to be. The highway didn't care about any of that, but the record does, and so do I.